This ESPN podcast is brought to you by Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance. Visit geico.com.
Coming up on the Best of the Paul Finebaum Show podcast, the SEC distributed a record $31 million to each school on the final day of SEC spring meetings. ESPN's Darren Ravel breaks down the SEC network's impact on the record number, plus your favorite calls. It's the Best of the Finebaum Show podcast, and it starts right now.
This is the Best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
Mike's live, winding things down as we speak. Actually speaking right now, he just described the end of the run for him as the best 13 years of my life. And by the way, you could say it's been the best 13 years in the SEC as well. So the commissioner, as we speak, saying goodbye, as he also did last night, a very emotional time for Commissioner Slive. As far as there is a little bit of news on that as well. We had the commissioner on this week, and Commissioner-elect Greg Sankey, and there was certainly some wondering when Sankey would actually take over, since the commissioner was slated to retire officially on July 31st. Slive announced that he will step down June 1st. So this will be it for him. He will not be seen again publicly as the SEC commissioner. There's still plenty of there will be a farewell dinner for him coming up in a few weeks in Atlanta. But as of Monday, he will step aside 2 months earlier than expected, and Greg Sankey will officially take over. By the way, John Hayes with me. That comes as no big surprise. That, of course, I spent 2 days with Commissioner Slive last week in his office and his home, so it wasn't hard to pick that bit of information up as I asked him how he feels walking out of this office every day, and he told me that I think last Thursday or Friday when he walked out, he said, "This will be the last time I'm here."
It's pretty appropriate that Mike Slive is having that press conference right now talking about how it's been a great run, best 13 years of my life, on the day that the SEC announced its payouts, record payouts, over $30 million to every school. You think about it, when he was first brought in as SEC commissioner, I think the payout was somewhere around, what, $100 million?
Yeah, it was right under $100 million. So I think it was $92 million.
And it's 455 today. Talk about a run. He's unquestionably the best commissioner of the SEC and maybe the best college commissioner of all time.
You know, I said that and meant it today. He announced he was stepping down. I remember being in Bristol that day. It was a very emotional and gut-wrenching time for all of us who have known him and truly loved him. But I'm glad to see him going out on this note, because it's just unbelievable. You think about, I think $92 million was the total allotment his first year. Every SEC school will get between close to $32 million now. And, again, we'll bring Darren Ravel on in a moment to talk about why. Certainly you have the college football playoff going on. And, yes, you also have the SEC network, which Clay Travis yesterday said is the big reason for the difference in what last year and this year. You can do the math.
And you spin it in terms of between the lines on the football field. When you have this type of money going around the SEC, what about programs like Mississippi and Mississippi State, who've had record years in 2014? And we've always asked, how do you maintain that success when you're going up against power programs like Alabama, like LSU? Well, now that extra $10 million, while it might not mean as much to a school like Alabama, it means something in Starkville, to Dan Mullen, where maybe those programs can maintain a level of success that they've never been able to maintain in their history.
Darren Ravel, who covers the sports business beat for ESPN, joining us now. Darren, thank you very much for the time. It's always good to catch up, certainly on a day that soccer has taken center stage in the world. I do want to get your reaction to that first before we get to the SEC matter. It's been watching this unfold. I know you've been part of the story, but your reaction to the day in Zurich.
Well, I just say, Paul, that I work for ABC News too, and never before in history of news has the sports world generated as much interest from the news side over the last year. I mean, if you just look at the variance of stories and the character stories that the sports world has generated, it's unbelievable. And here's yet another situation that seems impossible, where you have a guy who's been presiding over FIFA for as long as he has, days after an indictment is handed down to a bunch of his people. People have already pled guilty, and how he can basically soundly defeat his opponent makes no sense in any common sense world.
Unless we're talking about FIFA.
Well, I mean, a lot of it come in, and Jeremy Shaft and Bob Lee have done a great job all day. I mean, it comes down to a voting system where the smallest countries get as much of a vote as the biggest countries. It is not like an electoral college, and where not everyone thinks like we do. We always say, well, how is this person elected, or how does this part of the country believe this? Well, it's just we have no sense of what the African nations think of Sepp Blatter, other than that they like him. So
but Darryl,
not everyone is like us.
I was at a restaurant when I watched the gentleman from Jordan withdraw, and I thought that was nice of them to allow him to live if he withdrew from the race.
Again, in what world does a person who is going to go against the incumbent, who then has spent his time basically saying, I want to be the next him, when he has enough votes to actually cause a second vote, why would you say, I mean, it is common sense, why would you say, no, okay, that's okay? Doesn't make sense.
No, true. Anyway, we're joined by Darren Ravel, as we introduced him, the sports business analyst for ESPN and ABC News. And Darren, other than that, and it's like saying, oh, okay, other than the biggest story going in the world, I do want to get your reaction to the story down here. And on any other day, it certainly would get a lot of tongues wagging, and it will. But it was expected. But the SEC announced that they are pretty much the World Bank today as well. Handing out nearly $32 million to a team. The speculation certainly on why the difference between a year ago and today. The only thing a bystander could come up with is the fact that there has been a college football playoff, and yes, there is an ESPN SEC network.
Right. Yeah, no, the numbers are pretty amazing. Now, it's obviously not apples and oranges to say the Big 12 because of the number of teams, but if you compare it, it's significantly more than the Big 10. So what I did is I looked at over the last 6 years, factoring for inflation, SEC conference revenues grown 210%. And now let me give you the numbers on the growth. 1985 total revenue, and this is with just inflation-adjusted numbers, so just takes into account over time the value of money. So 1985 was an equivalent of $20 million in revenue total. 1995, $62.5 million in revenue. 2005, $134 million in revenue, and obviously 2015, $455. So, I mean, you can obviously see that in the last 10 years, it's been a different type of financial game.
What does it mean? And is there any way to, without being inside that operation, to know exactly where these numbers are coming from and how much can be attributed to the start of the SEC network?
Well, it's hard. I think it's very easy to log those numbers, and I think the first things that ADs are going to come up with, because they're pressured to explain why they're not the World Bank, is to say that the costs since 2005, say, have significantly increased. Whether it's more programs or more stadium rebuilds, the cost of the battle, the war in recruiting. It's hard to say, how much people are netting. I mean, I think what you said before, clearly the playoff and the SEC network, that's the big money there. But it's really hard to say kind of what this means. You know, this is not a number that looks particularly great for the fact that, you know, you have O'Bannon and the Kessler lawsuit breathing down the NCAA and schools' necks at this time.
Is there a way, and of course I asked this after the Big Ten beat the SEC, of course, and you're a Big Ten graduate, I might add, in the national semifinals. Is there a way to look at the Big Ten network, which has been up and running, I believe, for 7 or 8 years, and compare and contrast it with the SEC network, which has only been online for 9 months?
Well, you know, what's impressive about the Big Ten Network, because to be honest with you, and Dave Repston, my friend and Northwestern colleague, I did not give the Big Ten Network the greatest chance in the world in terms of I was not sure at the time. You know, they were on their own, and I was not sure it was going to work out. And they developed tremendous carriage. I think they developed. Obviously, they have the Fox relationship, which is necessary. It's hard to say exactly. I mean, I would say that the SEC network just has that. The difference is that they have a better chance at viewership when it's just random Paul Finebaum talking versus a game than the Big Ten network does, and that's because of the level of passion. So you have a number that's more sustainable regardless of what game is going on, because the level of passion in the SEC that does not exist to the same level at the Big Ten, and that's worth more money. That you have kind of a line where you say, well, even if we're not running a game, which is obviously the big carrot, people are still watching to this level, and that's the advantage that the SEC network has over the Big Ten network.
Darren Ravel was us. So let me close with where we started, back to FIFA and back to this scandal. These are important games, and obviously the World Cup, it was just only a year ago the whole world was watching down in South America. How much, or does any of this going on, playing in front of us, the criminal investigations, the long litigation that will ensue, how does that impact what most fans really care about, and those are the games?
Well, what makes this a little bit different from the NFL, who had again, its greatest year in its financial history, and the numbers came through today, 4 of the top 10 shows, and you kind of show like a Monday Night Football or Sunday Night Football, 4 of the top 10 shows among the 18 to 49 demographic in 2014 TV season were NFL programs. You compare that to FIFA, hey, is soccer just soccer? I'd say the only difference here is what's ahead, which is as long as that irrational World Cup in Qatar takes place, and there are, unlike the NFL, there are minds that these guys can step into ahead. And so I think that makes it a little bit different in terms of the noise seems to be like it's always going to be there. And yes, people just want their soccer, but I just think there's going to be a whole lot of noise going on. And obviously there's a whole lot of difference between, say, Roger Goodell making a bad decision on the number of games that Ray Rice should be suspended for, and a bunch of people in your organization being charged and pleading guilty to money laundering and corruption. So I don't think I'm not smart enough to say I know right now, but I would say it's different than asking me the question about the NFL.
Well said, and always great to catch up. Darren, many thanks. We'll be watching and talk to you very soon.
Thanks, Paul. Hopefully you got some of that extra revenue into your pocket.
It was all up front. Thanks, Darren. Great stuff, Darren Ravel. And sometimes what was it, Pogo, who once said about we have met the enemy, and it is us. We are part of the story today. I say we where we work, not us personally, but it is a very big story. What has been going on all week, and what we anticipated and most predicted would happen today with the SEC numbers. I mean, they are the numbers are enormous, and certainly everyone wondered 2 years ago when the SEC network was launched what impact it would have, how it would be received, and today I think is one of those days when people, not that there were many doubters out there, but those who were are doubting no more when you talk about $455 million in revenues distributed today by the SEC among its 14 institutions. Each member will receive $31.2 million. That's more than $10 million than last year. And you've already heard us talk about what the biggest differences are. And by the way, I say this not as not as an employee, not as a spokesperson for either side. I'm simply stating that this is just the first. This is 9 months in. This thing is just underway. It really hasn't. I wouldn't say it hasn't really gotten underway yet. Of course it has, but any startup is going to that is successful will improve throughout time. This is all money that's going, of course, to member institutions, and as John alluded to, it will really help. At Alabama, $11 million, LSU, but this is particularly important as you go down toward the schools that simply have not been as successful from a financial standpoint.
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
Jeff is up next in Georgia. Hey, Jeff.
Hey, Paul. How are you today?
I'm well, thank you. Good to hear from you.
Yeah. Question for you. I got actually a couple. As obviously folks are back on football. I'm not a gambler, but they've got the Vegas odds say Georgia has over under 9 wins, and I'm I struggle a little bit with that because I realize we're on the road at Auburn, and our nemesis is Florida. We've got Alabama at home, which I think is a good situation for us. I wanted to ask you though. I realize that we're bringing a new quarterback. He's going to either be bought up or Ramsey, but we've got 3 running backs that are going to be healthy at least coming into the season with Chubb, Sonny Michel, and Keith Marshall coming back for his senior year. And offensive line, the only person we're missing is Boss Andrews. We've got Malcolm Mitchell, so there's definitely action for play action there. What do you think? Just out of your opinion, I'm thinking 10 wins potentially. I just want to get your opinion, Paul. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I do like Georgia, and I agree with pretty much all you said. I'm still like everyone else. You have to be a little uneasy about the quarterback situation, but maybe not as much as some. John, you are in the Missouri camp, right?
Well, I honestly think it's a 2-team race, and it's Missouri and Tennessee. Georgia has everything in the backfield. They do. But year after year, Georgia's overrated and loses. Year after year, Georgia loses one of those games that they shouldn't. And I'm of the opinion that when a trend starts to become something that follows the team around. Georgia went out and looked at Lambert, I think a kid from Virginia who's a graduate transfer today, was on campus at Georgia. What's the point? I don't understand. To me, that screams in late May that you have no idea what you're doing at that position.
No, but John, let me ask you this. Okay, so if you look at Missouri, we have owned Missouri. They've won, obviously, the East for the last few years. Okay? That being said, we've beaten them. Okay?
But it's because of the schedule. It's not Mizzou. It's not the fact – last year Georgia was the better football team than Missouri. And who won the East? It was Mizzou. It has nothing to do with ranking these SEC East teams against one another. It's about Georgia's schedule. They have to play Alabama, they have to play Auburn, and then they have to go to Tennessee. If they win 2 out of those 3 games, I'd be surprised.
So you don't think we can beat – you're saying you don't think we beat Alabama at home?
I'm saying that I'd be surprised if Georgia wins 2 of those football games, goes 2-1 against Auburn, Alabama, and Tennessee. I would argue that that's 2 conference losses right there based on schedule. Then you lose one of those games that Georgia finds a way to lose every single year, and you're looking at 3 losses, and you don't win the East.
Yeah, but here's the problem, okay? If you look at the Tennessee game, Tennessee's still a young team. I think they've got, and obviously I realize this whole thing with the, financial aid things coming into play. But that being said, Georgia has always done well. I mean, we got lucky last year. I mean, the fumble got us the win at home. I'll tell you this. We can beat Tennessee. They got Jalen Hurd. I realize they've got a good quarterback. Georgia, I mean, with 3 running backs, I mean, heck, I don't feel that we can't go 2-1 out of those games. Why? What do you think?
I'm not saying that you can't. Heck, who knows? You could win all 3 of them. But if you're going to ask me right now, coming out of those 3 football games, how do they do? It's 1-2.
You really think that?
I do. Yes.
See, I think we go 2-1. And the game, if there was a game we're going to lose, I would say potentially Auburn, just because it's at Auburn, and you know how that series goes. It's.
I mean, you're playing Alabama. I mean, Paul.
You know what? Guess what? We did the blackout the last time at Alabama. It's not going to happen this time. We're not obviously. Georgia's
let me chime in here, Jeff. I tend to. The Tennessee game probably has me a little bamboozled. I have lost at Auburn. I actually think. I mean, right now, I think Georgia's going to beat Alabama.
I do too. I mean, I think we're going to beat Alabama at home. I mean, I'm scared about Auburn. I'll be honest. Here's the game that you still got to think about. That a lot of people don't even talk about. South Carolina. I don't care what anybody says. They've had our number. I mean, they really have.
Yeah, but no, I know where you're coming from there, and we'll hear the hype about Spurrier, but Georgia will beat South Carolina this year.
So
that will not be the game that John's referring to. I think I don't know about Tennessee yet. I mean, Tennessee's hard. I mean, until you see Tennessee, it's really hard to start making a lot of predictions.
What happened last season, though? You almost lost to Tennessee at home, a game.
Correct. We thought there was a fumble. I realize that. I mean, I know.
So why are you going to look at the Tennessee game this year in Knoxville against that team that you said was young, but still a year older than that team you almost lost to at home last year? I'm telling you, those 3 games are difficult, and then you add Mizzou to that list. It's not a shoo-in just because Georgia has a Heisman Trophy candidate at running back.
I'm not. Okay, let's talk on defense. Jeremy Pruitt. Look what we brought in, okay? Lorenzo Carter could be the player of the year on defense in the SEC. And you guys, I mean, you have to admit that. Think about how good he is. Trent Thompson, I realize he's a freshman. Guess what? You got a DT coming in, okay? Ray Drew was he was the big guy coming in, at that one point. I realize the kids, you never know who's going to mature at one point. But I'm going to tell you, Jeremy Pruitt has done a good job with his defense. And I think you're going to see significant improvement this year. So, I mean, I would assume, and this is just me, going into Tennessee, I think we have a good chance of beating them. Okay? I mean, as I said, I realize there's a hiccup. Florida, what did they run? 455 yards against us last year?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I know it. I mean, I'm a realist, okay? But the SEC East is there to win. I mean, there is not. I mean, I look at the West.
Yes, the SEC East was handed to you on a silver platter last year. Yeah, it was easier to win last year than it will be this year.
Why do you say that?
Because Tennessee has improved. Matty Mock looks to mature as a quarterback. They bring back Russell Hansborough, a very good running back. And you've got teams like South Carolina. Spurrier's going to improve. You just mentioned that as well.
I did.
Florida, who knows what's going to happen with McElwain? You couldn't beat him last year with Muschamp. If McElwain's a better coach than Muschamp, who knows what is going to happen again at the cocktail party? I don't know. It's a more difficult division to win in 2015 than it was in 2014. I promise you that.
Yeah, but
hey, listen,
go
ahead, Jeff.
Don't you think the team that we have is capable of winning the East?
Well, I mean, listen, let me answer. Jeff, you're Georgia. Of course you're capable.
Yeah. This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
Geico presents Strange Savings Stories. Astronomers detected an interstellar transmission. It stated, Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more. The implications were staggering. Was the cosmos telling us we could all save hundreds on car insurance with Geico? Or did their radar merely pick up a signal from the nearby Rufus and Clyde's morning show? We may never know.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
Let's shift to one of the big stories that we talked about all week long in Destin, and I frankly kept asking people, why are the SEC coaches whining? Aren't they playing right into the hands of Jim Harbaugh and the Big Ten? And the coaches continue to whine. They didn't seem to care. Meanwhile, our next guest, we'll talk about that, Nick Baumgartner from up in Michigan. He writes for MLive.com, covers the University of Michigan, and a headline the other day on a column saying Jim Harbaugh, Big Ten, have SEC sounding absurd over satellite camps. Nick, thanks for the time, and I don't always agree with what I read in Big Ten country, but I do this time. Thank you very much, and let's talk about it.
All right, sounds good, Paul.
Appreciate your time. We saw it up close down there, and it seemed ridiculous. I can only imagine what it was like where you live.
Yeah, I mean, it just consistently sounded like griping for griping's sake. I mean, the notion of SEC coaches and administrators sort of acting like the game wasn't fair seemed kind of funny to me, considering a lot of the stuff that goes on down there and has gone on down there for years. But that aside, that's not really. I mean, there was arguments about how these camps aren't good for players, or it's not good for this, or it's not good for that, or it doesn't make any sense. And when it all boiled down, it was just a bunch of guys complaining that they couldn't do it. And even if they could, they're not going to get the benefit out of it that these northern schools are. And it was just, guys being upset and they want it canceled because, I guess they just don't feel like they're going to get any benefit out of it even if they can do it. So I just thought it was ridiculous. I thought it sounded stupid, and I agree with you. I don't know why they continue to complain about it, even right up and through this week. I mean, I don't know how long that'll continue or if they're going to abolish their rule or not, but it just sounded kind of ridiculous to me.
Yeah, let me ask you. Certainly, James Franklin did it last year. He got a reaction. Nobody did anything about it though, and it seemed like when Harbaugh did it, it all came. The walls came tumbling down. Give us the backstory on what Coach Harbaugh decided to do, why he did it, and obviously we know it had a great impact.
Yeah, I think the difference there was, I think James Franklin went to maybe one or two camps last year, and he went to camps that were attended by other coaching staffs. So it caused a little bit of a stir, but not much. What Harbaugh did was basically take the idea and put it on steroids. They're going to, I believe it's 10 camps now in 7 states over the course of, I think, 7 days or 8 days or something like that in June. And what they're doing is every camp they go to, they will be the sole college represented. So it'll be hosted by a high school or a foundation or something else, and they will be the only coaching staff there. So basically, what Franklin did was, I'm going to show up at other SEC camps and make sure Penn State's name is there. What Harbaugh's doing is saying, I'm going to show up in camps in SEC territory and elsewhere out west as well and in Texas, and I'm going to be the only guy there. So it's just more intense. It's more of it. It's basically Jim Harbaugh being Jim Harbaugh and taking it to, a completely different level.
Let me ask you, first of all, what's behind this and what impact is it having other than the wine club from the South?
And in terms of impact, I guess we'll have to wait and see because they haven't done it yet. But, what's behind it is it's a chance to recruit. It's a chance to recruit fertile areas in the country that Michigan hasn't been able to recruit very well in a long, long time. They're trying to get their name in some of those spots. They're trying to build inroads. And basically what they're doing is they're going to areas where kids sometimes can't afford to get to Michigan for unofficials or whatever. They're going to those areas and they're saying, well, you can't come to us. We're going to try and come to you. And it's just a way to, if you have the money, and Michigan has a ton of money to spend, why not spend it on just going all over the place and trying to plant yourself in those areas, make sure that at least the kids know who you are, spread your brand. And that's all it really is. And anybody who says it's anything else, it's kind of foolish on the other side of it, too. These are recruiting camps. They absolutely are. And it's that's what the staff's doing. They're trying to recruit in, the best areas in the country. That's where big-time college football talent is, in the South and Texas and California, and that's where they're going.
And it's interesting because I've spoken to people up there. You cover the beat, so you know this a lot more than I do. And many wondered what happened to Michigan. Why did they used to be able to get players from Florida up there, and then started? I suppose, or help me if I'm wrong. This is the answer to that.
Yeah, I mean, it's the reason they don't get it, they haven't gotten a ton of them, I guess, is that it's been 7 years of. Maybe a little longer than that, even of kind of national irrelevance. And the last time Michigan was kind of in the, I guess maybe national title hunt, I guess you could say 2006. In 2006, these kids that are coming up now were 8, 9, 10 years old. So this whole thing is basically a process of re-pushing Michigan's brand to these areas that they used, in areas of Florida or Texas or California where the kids used to know who Michigan was, because they were on national TV every day. Now the landscape has changed. Michigan's fallen off. They've got Jim Harbaugh. Everybody knows who he is, and it's trying to capitalize on that and push Michigan's brand as far into every corner of the country that they can get it. And I think it's a clever way to do it. Other people maybe don't, but if you got the money to spend it, I say why not?
Certainly, Jim Harbaugh getting enormous attention, buzz. What kind of team will he have this year?
It's up in the air. I mean, the offense was bad last year. They were 5-7. They struggled. They'll have a good defense, but they still don't know who the quarterback will be. They brought in Jake Rudock, a transfer from Iowa. The offensive line has struggled. The offense got a lot of question marks. The schedule's not the easiest in the world. They still got to play Michigan State and Ohio State. Utah's not a terrible team. So, it'll be up in the air. I think it'll be a smarter team than it was last year. Last year's team wasn't very disciplined at all. So, even with that, I mean, I'm thinking 8-4 would be a pretty decent year for them. 9-3 would be really good. Anything below that would be a bit of a struggle. But, it's up in here. It's way too early to tell considering all the question marks they have on offense.
Nick, I know certainly Big Ten fans don't like when the league is attacked, and certainly it has been many times. What was the reaction in Ann Arbor, though, when Ohio State knocked Alabama out?
Yeah, honestly, it was mixed a little bit, I think. I think there was some fans that were, that are I'll never root for Ohio State as long as I live. To hell with that. I don't want to cheer for them at all. It sucks that they're doing well, but there was a lot of them more than I thought that were like good. Thank God finally somebody from this league, knocked off an SEC power, and maybe that'll start to shift some of the narrative that the lower level of the Big Ten is not as god awful as people think, and this, that, and the other. So it was more mixed than I thought it would be. But there was a lot of people up here that were pretty excited about seeing something else happen other than an SEC team win or Alabama continue to roll the Big Ten team. So. More people than you'd expect, I would say. But most of them, in the end, I think rooted for Oregon in the title game, but I think most of them were okay that Ohio State was there.
Nick, finally, we want this to be good versus evil, or maybe evil versus evil when it comes to Harbaugh and Urban Meyer. What's their relationship, and how do you see this playing out?
I don't know if they have much of a relationship, honestly. Neither one of them has really talked about the other so far. They've gone at it a few times in recruiting, but not as much because it just started. I think it'll be interesting because I think these are both guys who are sort of cut from the same competitive cloth in that they'll do just about anything they can to get an edge, and they'll do just about anything they can to win. And when you have two guys like that go at it, and they go at it for most recruits, they go at it every year in the league. They play every season at the end of the year. So I think it'll be a lot of fun. I think it'll be as advertised. I think the fireworks will be there. They'll be there in the recruiting trail all year. They'll be there the week of the game. They'll be there in the game as well. So it's two of the game's most electric personalities, two of the game's best coaches, and I think it'll live up to its bill, and it should be fun and exciting to watch them go at it.
Nick, many thanks for the time.
All right, Paul.
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
Good old
Daryl
right there. AJ from Newton, Georgia. They even named the highway after him down here.
What was that song he sung about?
You know how he got discovered?
No.
His wife ran across Glenn Campbell. She had some demos of Alan Jackson, of her husband, and she ran across Glenn Campbell in the airport.
Yeah.
And she was, so that's how it all got started for Alan Jackson. But I mean,
by the time I got to Phoenix.
And by the time you got to Phoenix.
Yeah, it's kind of a Glenn Campbell song. Anyway, go ahead.
Oh, okay. What do you mean? You mean like a rhinestone cowboy? Oh, never mind. Anyway.
Or kind of like a Wichita lineman.
I think Glenn Campbell did. He's in bad health, right?
Yes.
Hurt, I think. Yeah, that's what I heard.
He has Alzheimer's.
First of all, I do not understand how people think that Brian Schottenheimer is going to be. It's not that. That is Mark Richt's offense. He built that offense. That wasn't Mike Bobo's offense. Richt built that offense. Mike Bobo was a nut. Mark Richt taught him everything he knew. Taught him how to be an offensive coordinator. Taught him everything he knew. He had no coaching experience prior to going to work for Mark Richt. So it ain't that big of a deal. So all these people out here that want to hate thinking that Brian Schottenheimer is going to cause it's going to be negative toward Georgia. I mean, it's not going to happen. And let me say this, Paul. We got 4 offensive line. You saw how Georgia ran the ball last year, okay, with Chubb. We got 4 of our friggin' offensive linemen returning. The defense is going to be better. Just do me a favor. Make sure you pick Mizzou, okay? Please. But, I mean, I don't understand how all these people are just want as far as Mark Richt, he's an average coach. He was a kid. I'm going to tell you something, dude. In the SEC championship game in 2012, that's a touchdown. I knew exactly what play they were running. That ball was going over the back shoulder of that corner. Malcolm Mitchell would have called it. They run it all the time. Those touchdowns, that ball hadn't got deflected. No doubt in my mind. But one deflection makes Mark Richt from being a great coach to just, he's a good human being, but he's not a very good coach. That's a bunch of baloney. Big time baloney. I went to 2000, Paul, the Book of Knowledge, okay? Page 101 in the Book of Knowledge. 100 in the Book of Knowledge. Georgia will win that championship 2017. You got it all laid out right there for you. My conference can be your conference, page 100. You got it laid out. You said Georgia's had 3 opportunities for a national championship. It was in 2002. It was in 2007, and it was in 2012. 5 years differential between all them years. So our next shot will be 2017, and we will win it. And I want to tell you one last thing. I tweeted, you know who Bryce, the quarterback, Bryce Ramsey, you know who he is? Mm-hmm. You familiar with him?
Yeah.
He's going to be the quarterback of Georgia this coming up season. I seen him a tweet the other day.
Oh, good.
he actually favored it, and that's what I said. Ramsey, are you going to lead us to greatness? Because when I think SEC titles, I want to think Green, Shockley, Ramsey. Are you with me? And he favored it. So, I mean, we're going to be just fine. Alabama fans need to quit whining. I mean, they're slipping. But just because you're not number 1, you're number 2, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Paul, what's your big plans for the weekend?
I don't know. I've been gone for about a week. I'm just going to kick back.
Kick back. Okay. Well, do me a favor. You see Trooper throwing the ball and come down Columbus. Go Dogs. See you, Paul.
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast. ESPN Radio, bringing you directly to the biggest events in sports.
Center field, well hit, Hunter back, out of here!
From opening day of baseball,
throw to the plate, safe at the plate,
right through the World Series.
For the 3rd time in 5 seasons, the San Francisco Giants are the champions of the baseball world.
Whether it's LeBron, Chris Paul, or Kevin Durant, when the NBA tips off, ESPN Radio is right there when a champion is crowned.
We have a new world champion. The San Antonio Spurs are the world champions.
And when the magic of bowl season arrives, ESPN Radio is your home for the new college football playoff.
The college football playoff first national champion, the Ohio State Buckeyes.
The biggest events in sports can be found right here on ESPN Radio. This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
Larry down in Shelby County, Alabama.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Finebaum. What's up?
Larry, saved the show.
Hey,
you did
brother,
yesterday.
you know what? You sound pretty tired today. I guess you are pretty whipped, ain't you? You know, making those big selections. George.
I'm feeling better already, Larry.
Woo! What's up?
Hey, Larry, one question for you, okay?
As long as I ain't spelling nothing. I ain't spelling nothing.
Let's make believe it's the final word of the National Spelling Bee, and the word is Bielema.
I'm gonna try one more time now. And I ain't looking nothing up. Bielema. Pronounce it again.
Well, I'm using your pronunciation.
Oh, Bielema. All right.
The word is Bielema. Brett Bielema.
Belamaner. Bielema. Is that close?
Did somebody write that down? I've got to get that again. One more time. I think you were pretty close.
Bemiliaer. Bielema. Bielema. Is that right?
One more. Okay, let me do it again. I think you were closer the first time. The word is Bielema. He is the head football coach at the University of Arkansas.
All right. Bielema. B-E-L. Bielema. A-M-I-A-E-R. Bielema. Bielema. Yeah, Bielema.
You get that this time?
I wish I had a bell in here. I don't, but it's B. Larry has voiced in, and his official spelling of Brett Bielema as B-E-L-A-M-I-A-E-R. Congratulations, Larry. You nailed it.
Woo! Right, Cameron, you ain't no dumbass redneck. What's up? Oh, I knew I could get that bad, boy.
Okay, I will say what everyone in Arkansas just got through saying. Woo,
damn.
pig.
Oh, my God, I got it, man. I knew. I didn't look it up. I swear I didn't. I just kept thinking about that. But, man, that's great. I done something on the Finebaum show. Hey, you know, man, I'm going to tell you, we're going to have to rebaptize you in some crimson water, Paul.
What happened, Larry?
Well, you're going all these crazy picks with Georgia. But, you know, I'm kind of proud you picking Georgia, Paul, because here lately when you picked us, we lost. You know it?
You're right, Larry.
You're absolutely right. And, Paul, have a good weekend. TGIF, Jack. Roll damn Tide.
Mike is up next. Hey, Mike, thank you for the call.
Hey, Paul, thank you for taking my call. I tell you, the timing could not be perfect, more perfect. I go back to a college graduate in 1982 and a newlywed in 82, and there was a person that started writing in Birmingham about that time named Paul Finebaum, and there were days I just wanted to try to find you at the paper and choke you because you have a uncanny way of saying things and picking the side that will stir the pot the most sometimes, and your writing was that very same way, if you recall, back in those days. And I miss your writing greatly. Let me say that straight up.
Well, Mike, thank you. I appreciate, number one, you remembering, because the 95% of the people I run into don't remember that that's really what I did for the majority of my career.
Oh, yeah, and you could stir both pots equally, the Alabama pot and the Auburn pot, from one day to the next, and even had the intestinal fortitude to call out Coach Bryant when things weren't looking good at times, or in your early years. So that was great, and then the radio show. But I do have one question. Is there a separate line or method that some of our callers that I hear in my commute from work every day are able to get on that others may not have that same opportunity to do?
No, Mike, here's the answer to that question, and I say this in full disclosure. There isn't a secret line. However, there is a line at Bryce that people can go down the hall to pick up a white courtesy phone.
I love it, the red line. And the reason I ask that is that sometimes it appears, just like in your writing that could stir the pot, that at times you may be perpetuating a stereotype for the different fan bases by allowing the same people to call.
Mike, come on. I mean, anyone who knows me would know I would never do that.
Okay, Paul. Just wanted to make sure it was all on the up and up.
I'll close by saying this. This show is as legitimate as wrestling.
All right, one more question. Would you at any point admit that maybe your meteoric rise from just Birmingham popularity to national popularity did happen to coincide with Nick Saban's return and Alabama and Auburn both ascending to the top of college football?
Mike, I've said this a couple of times. I said it actually to the crowd when we were in Tuscaloosa this year before the Florida game, and I said it the day I was hired at ESPN that there is no mystery. The rise of my career coincided identically to Nick Saban's arrival and rise at Alabama. I mean, the two are, not to get too deep inside the numbers, but this show was always reasonably popular from the first day that Nick Saban arrived. If you measure that with my first day, just from a radio standpoint, I'd say the audience grew about 4 times that before I left Birmingham, and there's no telling what's going on now because of the national reach on television.
All right. Well, thanks so much for taking the call, and we do still love you in Birmingham, and I hope if we do, in fact, fall off the cliff, as many are predicting for Alabama and Coach Saban now, that you won't follow.
Thank you, Mike. No,
right,
yeah, you know, a lot of people have that isn't a new story, and I'm glad you brought it up. I've been very honest about it, and people, I'll never forget. It was about 2 years ago, last week, when I was introduced at ESPN. I remember being on a couple of different shows, and that came up, and I said it, and people said, "You got to be kidding me!" And I said, "No," and I'm not saying that it's the only reason. I mean, we were reasonably successful, but it helped, and not only from a popularity standpoint, but from an issue standpoint. Suddenly, instead of talking about coaching firings at the end of the year, like we did so often, or NCAA probation, we were doing the show from the national championship. And there are a couple of things that happened. Obviously, the film Roll Tide War Eagle helped put this show on the map, because the documentary, which was still being shown on ESPN, was done through the eyes of this program. So there's a couple other reasons, but those two had a lot to do with it. Mike is up next. Mike, thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Paul. Auburn graduate, Auburn fan, first-time caller, and enjoy talking with you. Enjoy your show.
Thank you very much.
Wanted to follow up on kind of interesting that point came up earlier, caller that would have to know district that mentioned the Georgia Tech Tulane question, Paul. I don't know the exact times, but I'm sure of the general time frame. I attended Auburn in the mid-late 70s, but Georgia Tech and Tulane both left the SEC in like the early mid-60s. I do remember vaguely reading articles about it, and I think you perhaps will know more, but the general perspective was, as you remember, Tulane for years played in the old Sugar Bowl Stadium, which sat about mid-75,000. Was one of the biggest stadiums in the South, perhaps in the country at the time, and Georgia Tech played at Grant Field, which also was, at that time, one of the larger stadiums. And I think the main issue was their perspective of not wanting to share equally in overall revenues and gate receipts amongst the rest of the conference members, and thought, because it's, again, hard to believe now, but as you remember, Paul, back then, there was no large on-campus stadiums generally in the SEC. Most,
No, by the way, you are correct. Tech got out in 64, Tulane in 66. I didn't know that.
Yes.
That's very interesting, because I really I vaguely remember the conversations about it, but that is a very interesting point.
Well, it's an interesting point, and when you think about it, Paul, and how about you add, when they get out, of course, disastrous decision for both, particularly Tulane, absolutely disastrous for them, because that would be a great trivia question. Most people are astonished. But Tulane actually, I think, was in the late 40s, 1 or 2 times, won the SEC. So they weren't always horrifically bad, but disastrous for them, not good for Georgia Tech. It could compare that, Paul, to the college landscape and how it would have changed in 1992, which, of course, we all SEC fans remember when Arkansas and South Carolina came in, and more particularly Florida State rebuffed the SEC. Imagine the difference in the college football landscape if FSU had said yes. I still remember Bobby Bowden's interview a few years later, and he, in a very candid way, I was surprised, acknowledged that absolutely he thought it was still a good decision, because he knew coming into the SEC and playing the likes of Alabama and Auburn, Georgia, LSU, Florida, that the years of them always winning 10, 11 games would not continue. So would have been a lot different with that. Those three decisions as far as the schools.
No, listen, thank you, Mike. I really do appreciate it. Thanks so much. Yeah, for those who don't remember, the Sugar Bowl, which is now, of course, at the Louisiana Superdome, used to be played in Tulane Stadium. That's exactly what happened. So, of course, the Saints played there as well. I think Maybe they didn't. Maybe the Super Bowl coincided with the Saints. I can't remember.
B-E-L, Balaam, A-M-I-A-E-R, Balaam. Balaam. Yeah, Balaam.
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
I-Man is calling next.
Good afternoon, Paul. Great show. I think, Paul, over the years, you would agree that I've probably been one of your callers, but I've been one of your best listeners as well. And you were talking about how your career kind of coincided with Saban. I think it goes back further than that. When you syndicated this program around the state, you had the greatest caller fan base out of Birmingham, second to none. When I heard it, I was just shocked. I mean, you had to just love it when you looked down and saw Ray from Springville, Elmo, Bobby from Homewood, Shane from Centerpoint, Don from downtown, Liberty Bell, Tom from Chalkville. You just had to love that. And then when you went syndicated, then, of course, Sports Illustrated saw you. That's when you were kind of like that new album to me, that new band, and you just progressively got better, from Pronounced Skinner to Street Survivors. And right now you're in that White Album stage by the Beatles. You're just winging it, and there's all kinds of critics, and the critics have been, mainly callers from the program. I don't know of anybody national outside of maybe other talk shows, but they're just trying to coattail off of your name, so it makes them more relevant. But I think your career took off when the Sports Illustrated came in, and the daring move that you and Pat Smith had to syndicate the program and carry it to different places. And at that point, Tommy Tuberville was running. He was running rampant, and the I-Man was killing it. The I-Man was killing it. 7 fingers, ladies and gentlemen. The I-Man was killing it. You know I had a great time. Well, Paul, I don't think it was Saban. I think that the things that happened was your determination.
Well, let me say this though, just in terms of context, the show in 2001 did go statewide, and there are a couple of things that were very significant. That was very significant. Then Sports Illustrated did list us as one of the top shows in the country, which got us recognition. And then, in my mind, the regionalization created callers outside of Birmingham, and you've heard me refer to those guys as the Gemini 7 because they were, the Mercury 7 because they were the original astronauts, so to speak. And then another move happened in 2009, which really changed a lot of things even more dramatically, and that's when the show went from a regional show to a national show on Sirius XM.
Right. And the thing with Saban was it brought the Bammers out of the woodwork because they were out there, exiled for years, and it brought the crazies back out.
I mean, you know this, and very few people can believe it, but before Nick Saban got there, the average Alabama fan wanted to kill me.
Oh, absolutely, every other day. And because you were just being brutally honest, and there again, Tommy Tuberville's adding fingers, and they were getting crazy. I mean, that was the deadliest period for any other fan from Bama fan. When your team beat Alabama, you went home on Saturday night. You did not go to the bars. You went home because there was consequences because your
how many games in a row did Auburn win?
7. Bunches, two.
Think about that for a second. Auburn won 7 games in a row over Alabama.
In a row, and I'm calling every day. And
the jokes were Tommy Tuberville raised his finger, and then the jokes were pretty soon he's going to have to go to his toes.
That's right. And Nick Saban did bring the crazies out, and that brought the numbers back. But, all these people the main people that have complained were callers, and they've quit. They come back, they quit. And not only did they quit, they had to come on this program and announce they quit in their own tones and terms, and then hang up. But you know what? This program, and when you listen, this network, and I'm proud. I am so proud you allowed me to be a part of it, Paul. But you're a mainstay in the SEC network, and this is the fastest growing. How do you phrase that again? Of all in the history of cable.
Well, Mike's Live said this on Tuesday. It was when the SEC network launched. It was the most successful launch in the history of cable television. And when you look at the numbers today, it's confirmed everything that was said about it 9 months ago.
And all these people said the show sucks, it's getting worse, and blah, 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 blah. All these self-important people. And you know, Paul, the one thing constant through all that, me and you, War Damn Eagle, we're only getting faster.
The Squirrel is up next. Hey, Squirrel.
Hey, thanks for taking my call, Paul. And
sure.
Thanks for Iman for walking us down memory lane like that. It was great until the end there.
I'm surprised he didn't say that. Anyway, I'm surprised he didn't go back to the 40s and 50s and 60s.
Yeah, I was waiting for that, you know. So, but it was beginning to be a little white noise there at the end, but that's typical of his calls. No problem there. But I like your comment to that caller a few calls ago about the show's as real as wrestling. It just reminded me of my grandmother. She grew up outside of Georgia, Alabama, and she always thought that wrestling was real and that the moon landing was fake. And I think she went to her grave thinking that, to be honest with you, so that was pretty funny. But Larry, classic call from Larry right there. We're both members of we were both products of the Tennessee public school system. Where was Larry when we were doing those spelling bees back in the day? You know?
I don't.
Think about it. Do you think anybody's told him yet, or do you think he's still basking in his glory, or what do you think? Seriously.
I think Larry right now thinks he could have won the spelling bee.
Oh my God! Yeah, that was one of the classic Larry calls of all time. But I just had to call and rag my boy. Hey, did I man say that your number one leg humper has quit the show again?
Hey, by the way, Squirrel, let me correct myself. Auburn only won 6 straight against Alabama, not 7, as we both agreed on.
Yeah,
I don't know. I think
over. Those days are over. The Shula era is gone. You know,
did I ever tell you?
Are over.
Tommy Tuberville once held up 6 fingers. Actually, it was the 4 straight wins over Shula. He said, I said, you have a 4-0 record against Mike Shula. He said, yeah, what don't you think that's great? I said, shouldn't that count as a half a win? I mean, you're really counting them. By the way, as far as Jim is concerned, I think he called, I don't know, when did he call last? I haven't been here much lately.
And Tommy, wasn't he the one who was going to leave Oxford in a pine box?
That's exactly right. He did.
Aloha.
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
Larry is calling next. Larry, go right ahead.
Hey, Mr. Finebaum, how you getting along today?
Okay.
Hey, great. Hey, I tell you what, Georgia, they can get the freaking 4 horsemen back playing, and they got one big problem. That's Mark Richt. Take your number 2 pencil out and write a 3 down and just leave it there for the next 5 years. But to me, there's only one call you can make today, and even I can't deny the greatness of Mike Slive. I mean, this is a business, a bottom-line business, and when they broke out those checks today, that told me all I needed to know. I mean, I put him up there with Rozelle and Stern as the 3 greatest commissioners of all time. I mean, I think a lot of it he fell into in a way his timing was right. I mean, 20 years ago, A&M would have never thought of leaving the Big 12, but he totally exploited and played Texas Eagle against them. I mean, the lost odds is nothing but a BSer. And Mike Slive his word was his bond, and that worked. And now I look at 2 leagues, and you see which one's in better financial shape. So I just wanted to say good luck to him. I hope he does really good. And the last thing I'll say, as far as Sankey, I don't know about him. He seems a little too serious for me, but I did appreciate that part that he was talking about running the marathons. You think about your life and, your adrenaline's pumping, and I agree to that. If an old boy comes home from work early one day and you run out that back door, adrenaline's pumping pretty good. Thanks, Paul.
Rich is calling next in Atlanta. Hey, Rich.
Hey, Mr. Finebaum, how you getting along
today? Great.
Gotcha. Hey, buddy, thanks for taking my call. Hey, Paul, real quick, I just wanted to say congratulations to you and your staff. What a tremendous show. And, this SEC network and the success is a huge part due to you and your show, and that's your entire staff. From Dan and Carlos to Johnny and Mark and everybody. I mean, you guys are just tremendous. No, you're welcome, man. And I think you need a new agent. I think that you need to fire Jimmy Sexton and hire Drew Rosenhaus because you totally outperformed your contract. You need to start doing push-ups in the driveway, But no, seriously, you guys do a tremendous job. And real quick, Paul, $455 million and no alternate channel. I mean, is it because the ratings of the show would be higher than the actual games, and they don't want y'all to compete against each other? You don't have to comment. That's what I think.
Yeah. Well, okay.
They don't want you to compete against each other. I get it. I mean, I understand the business of it, but that kind of stinks for us guys that got to lie to our wife and say, when it's not on, I got to go get a gallon of milk. And she says, well, tell Paul I said hello.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, it's the truth, too, man. Hey, Georgia Tech, you know this. They left the SEC. You know why. Bobby Dodd hated Bryant. You remember all that? Sure. Yeah, absolutely. There was a couple incidents. The over-recruiting was the biggest one. Coach Bryant would probably recruit about 100 kids a year, stash them away. And then there was, I think it was a punt return or a kick return where the Alabama kid just drilled the Georgia Tech kid. Hit him, and they remember all that?
Oh, sure. No, that was a big deal.
One of them suspended, yeah. And then, again, the last thing, which I think the funniest story was, I think it was 61, where Coach Bryant came out of the tunnel with a helmet on because all the Tech fans were throwing whiskey bottles at him. I mean, to this day, they still hate each other. That's why you'll never see Georgia Tech play Alabama.
Well,
so
and that's why when you may remember this in 1987, when Alabama inexplicably hired Bill Curry over Bobby Bowden, Bill Curry from Georgia Tech, the Alabama fan base never embraced him and never would because of that.
Absolutely right. That's correct. Hey, Tulane Stadium, you were right about that. That was the ancestral home of the Sugar Bowl. But, Paul, that also hosted a Super Bowl, too. Is that correct? Remember, I think it was Super Bowl III?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. It wasn't 3. 3 was in Miami. That was the famous Joe Namath over.
That's right.
But yeah, they hosted Super Bowls at Tulane Stadium.
I think one. I think, was it the Jim O'Brien with the Colts when he made the field goal? That's what I think.
Yeah, that was 72, I believe, or 73. No, excuse me, 70 maybe. But you're absolutely right about that. The Super Bowl was at Tulane Stadium.
Yeah. And I-Man, he brings it all the time. I love him. He's the Bo Jackson of Finebaum callers. And I'm glad you corrected the 6. It wasn't 7, it was 6. I was at the game, and I believe it was 08, where they just waxed them in Tuscaloosa, remember? And Tuberville took off.
Yeah, the streak ended. I mean, Auburn, that's what people always talk about, this rivalry. Auburn lost in 08 36-0, and then in 2012 they only lost 49-0.
Great.
Thank you for listening to the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast. Tune into the Paul Finebaum Show every day from 3 to 7 Eastern on the SEC Network or on the ESPN radio app.